What does your child's anger really mean? If you're the parent of an older child or teenager, the chances are they've said at one time or other that they hate you, or you're stupid, or they wish they could go live in Paraguay with another family. What I see so often in the parents I work with and in myself is that when our children say these things to us, we're so dazed by the emotional punch in the guts, the guilt, the hurt, the perceived ingratitude, that we sometimes forget to ask ourselves, what do they actually mean? Does he really hate me? Am I really a terrible mother? Where is Paraguay? In this video, I'm going to talk you through the secret to translating any angry, painful, or distressing message that you receive from your child, no matter how harshly they deliver it. And at the end, I'll explain how you can use this information to help you to figure out how to respond. Imagine all of the angry words our children say are like messages coming through a crappy walkie-talkie. There's a lot of sound coming through, but it's kind of confusing and unclear. Sometimes maybe they forget to push the button. Sometimes there's an echo. Sometimes there's a terrible squeaking. Sometimes we've forgotten to push the button on our end. Hello? Can you... Only little bursts of communication actually make it through to us. So there can be a really big mismatch between the words that we're hearing and the deeper meaning that they're trying to convey with their message. A common response when we hear our children really angry is to try to stop their angry words at all costs, perhaps by threatening, punishing, explaining. Basically anything we can do to stop their anger and make the unpleasant words go away. We also put a lot of emphasis on self-regulation skills, trying to teach our children to calm down, teach them breathing techniques, maybe even sending them to therapy or to psychologists. And supporting our children to learn how to care for their emotions can be incredibly helpful. In fact, I'm working on a whole playlist about this. But the problem is, when we only focus on teaching self-regulation and we stop trying to listen to the message itself, we can inadvertently make the message much harder to hear. Because like it or not, our children's anger is a message. And when we're not making an attempt to hear it, we will miss this important information. There are also all sorts of other factors that will impact how clear a child's message is going to be, including the child's temperament and personality, their age and developmental level. Of course, younger children will have a much harder time expressing clearly what they're saying, as will children with communication difficulties or children with ADHD or autism. Even teenagers can really struggle when they're going through hormonal changes. The clarity of the message will also be impacted by what kind of communication they've heard and experienced while they're growing up. Children learn mostly by copying our patterns of communication, and so this will shape how easily they're able to communicate difficult messages. And importantly here, the more emotionally distressed they are, the further the gap is likely to become between what they're trying to communicate and their actual words. High emotion introduces so much more static into the system, making it so much harder for us to understand. Unfortunately, this means that when the message is most important to them, they're likely to have the hardest time expressing in a way that we'll be able to hear. So what is the secret to decoding your children's most angry words in communication? What are they actually trying to tell you? There are two really important principles that can completely transform how well you understand your child in these moments. And I'm going to illustrate this with Sam, a mother I've been working with recently. Every night she was getting into the same fight with her teenage son about his homework. This would inevitably end with her son slamming the door and screaming some quite painful words at her. You don't understand what it's like to be me. You never listen. You're such a horrible mother, that kind of thing. The principle that really transformed this situation for Sam was understanding that everything our children say and do is a kind of communication telling us about their needs. This is a central principle of nonviolent communication, and it's an insight that can really transform how you understand your child. What this means practically is that when we're with our child and they're triggered or upset and expressing their pain, we can just translate whatever it is they're saying by simply thinking to ourselves, what is it they need right now? In Sam's case, when her son said, "You don't understand," his need was probably for understanding. When he said, "You never listen," his need was probably to be heard. And when he raged that Sam was a horrible mother, he was probably crying out for care and love. maybe even some support. As soon as Sam really grasped this principle, it was like a light switching on, an absolute revelation, because she now had the remote control that could put the subtitles on whenever her son was upset. "You're such a dick! You never let me do anything. My life sucks. Why are you so mean? You're so controlling. Why do you have to be such an idiot all the time?" To help you practice this, think of something your child says to you that might feel a bit painful, and then have a go guessing what they might be needing. What really matters to them in this moment? What is so important to them? What do they really need? What are they longing for? And if all this talk about needs is completely foreign to you, you're not alone, don't panic. Unfortunately, this is not something that most of us were taught. If you want some inspiration, you're very welcome to download this feelings and needs chart from the description below to help you figure out what might be going on for your child. The second really important principle relates to the intensity or the size of the message. As we've already seen, the higher the emotional intensity of what they're saying, how upset they are, how distressed, how big and angry the message is, the harder it's going to be for them to communicate it literally and simply through their words. Their message is going to be much more obscured by things like shouting, crying, maybe even swearing, or angry actions like door slamming, throwing things. All of these things introduce so much static to the message that it will be quite distorted. It's going to take us much more work to understand it. But the emotional intensity itself is very useful information. It tells us the intensity or size of the need. Higher emotional messages, bigger messages, mean bigger need. When our children are very emotionally charged, what they're really sharing with us is that their need is very big. So we can use the size of the message as a pretty good indicator of how much this matters to them. If they're really mad about it, it means it really matters to them a lot, so it's probably worth us paying attention to. Think of yourself when you haven't been heard about something that's really important to you, when you've been asking for help with the dishes 500 times and your family are all still sitting on the couch. You may start to feel quite angry, and you might communicate this message in a way that's not literally true. "You're all lazy." You don't really think your family are idiots, but the intensity of your message is a pretty good indicator of how much this matters to you. You really want support, cooperation, for your family to hear you, and our kids are no different. So no, they don't literally hate you or want to move to Paraguay, but they do have a really big and intense need, possibly for love, for understanding, maybe for support or care. And this is the problem with this common parenting advice we receive to ignore all of our children's outbursts. While there are certainly times when stepping away from a highly charged conversation can give you both time to settle your nervous systems and process and calm yourselves, it's important to hold in mind the importance of the message they were trying to bring to you and come back to it when you have enough capacity to really explore it with them. If we continually ignore the messages that they're sending us with their anger, we're just adding to their frustration and hurt and compounding the message's intensity over time. Next time, the desperation to be heard and understood will be even higher, and the message is likely to be bigger and louder, but the clarity even worse. So when they are expressing big pain, this is not a moment for teaching or big lessons or lectures. This is a moment for gentleness, care, and listening, but not listening to the static. Taking the time to actually unwrap the message that our children are offering us and listen to the deeper message that's beneath it. Because this message is really a gift. And it's well worth listening to. Once we know what our child needs, we can actually help. As soon as Sam grasped that it wasn't actually that her son hated her or thought that she was a terrible mother, it was just that he really wanted to be heard and understood about how hard homework was for him. He wanted some care and support about how to handle the pressure he was under. She was able to completely pivot how she was responding. When she was just focusing on her son's words, she responded with defensiveness, prickliness, hardness, lectures, and telling him to calm down, exactly the opposite of what he really needed. Her responses were therefore making matters worse. When she focused instead on his needs, Sam was able to respond with warmth, care, and curiosity. She could listen and try to understand. And what she found was that it really didn't take long for her son to shift out of his hardness and anger and become vulnerable. Because guess what? Underneath anger, there are always more vulnerable emotions: sadness, fear, grief, shame, hurt. She was finally able to meet her son in these fears and shame rather than staying stuck in the battlefield against him. What can really help here is remembering that whatever your child is saying about you is actually about them. It's about their needs, their feelings. A little cheat code here is whatever they say about you, you can just flip it to see what it might mean about them. If they say, "You don't understand," what they mean is, "I want to be understood." If they say, "You don't care," we can hear, "I need care." If they say, "I hate you," we can hear this as them craving love. Whatever they say about you, we hear something about what they need. Let their literal words fly over your head and the deeper meaning touch your heart. Because this is the true meaning of any angry words our child sends us. They are telling us about their needs. And there is one huge need that comes up time and time again for our children. And the research suggests it's behind the vast majority of behaviour challenges. It's so important I have a whole playlist about it, which you can see here.